Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
Ever since we opened the business, one of the goals was access, and how do we make this accessible to more people? So COVID coming along, we had to make some major business changes, and one of the things that we did is we got on board with Colorado Medicaid. We had 3 clinics a few months ago. We had 3. We had one in Denver. We also have one in San Antonio, one in Austin, Texas. Recently, in the past few weeks, opened another location up in Westminster. It can be as cheap as $2 or potentially free for folks who've already met their deductible. The onyr is Dr. Carl Bonnet, and he's a 20-year Army vet. You actually have a higher chance of dying from suicide as a military vet than anything else. Number one is the medication itself. We know where the source is. So at a party, the source might be questionable. We have a source for that. He came in for his initial treatment, and we gave him a very small dose, and he was off in ego death territory. Every one of our patients, we give homework every time. So after your ketamine treatment, you go for a walk, watch sunset, and no social media, no talking to that friend or family member who's going to piss you off, and really be conscious of, just take it in. Key demographics has been treatment resistant depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD. This is Neil Haznar from Klarisana, and you're listening to Airey Bros Radio.
What's up, y'all? This is Airey Bros Radio, and this is episode 79 with Neil Haznar. You ready, Prince?
Stoked to give the fans of Airey Bros Radio Neil Haznar and all the ins and outs and what have yous of ketamine-assisted therapy.
Yo, we're going deep with Neil today on the ins and outs of ketamine-assisted therapy. And it's good to find out that now you can get ketamine-assisted therapy covered under healthcare. Boom. This is a great episode. Had a lot of questions for Neil. Neil broke it down, took the time from what it's like, what the process is, what the therapy session is like, how many sessions, and then just answered some random ketamine questions that I had for him. So great episode. Super stoked to talk with Neil. And hey, now that we know we can get on that healthcare train, might need to go dabble into some ketamine assisted therapy. What do you think, dog?
Thank you, Colorado HMO. Let's go, baby. Let's go. No drip either, man. We're going right through the muscle. So let's do this.
Yeah. Neil even breaks it down and talks to us about intravenous versus intramuscular and why ketamine treatment is intramuscular. So yeah, if you guys have questions, dig a little bit deeper. If you're dealing with PTSD, headaches, chronic pain, you got some childhood trauma that you need to dig in and dig out, you might want to look into some ketamine assisted therapy. So check it out. As always, have an open mind, and whenever you're dealing with psychedelic treatments, remember you have to do the work yourself, and it's important not to have any expectations and to be committed to your reintegration. You got anything else, dog?
It's a great episode. Stoked to give this to the dog pound. And as always, crew, make sure you rate, review, subscribe. Give us that 5-star. We know you guys like it. Put it out there so other people can find the podcast. They find the podcast through those reviews. That algorithm sets it off and it puts it so other people could see it. So do us a solid, rate, review, subscribe. Follow us on social media at Airey Bros. And as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Airey Bros Radio.
yo, click on the links in the show notes, check out our sponsors, show them some love. And hey, if you're a company that's got a cool product, you want the Airey Bros to check it out, maybe get in bed with you, do a little collaboration. You scratch our back, we'll scratch your back. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Give us a holler. Much love. Namaste from the boys of 1512. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your time and also your expertise on this area of our interest. So we're stoked to get into it with you today.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for the invite.
Yeah, for sure. How's your day going?
Good. Staying busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, never a dull moment.
Has there been more of an uptick with everything that's been going on in your services?
There has. So one of the things that's been interesting is with this, with COVID coming up, we used to be a cash pay business. And ever since we opened the business, one of the goals was access and how do we make this accessible to more people? So COVID coming along, we had to make some major business changes. And one of the things that we did is we got on board with Colorado Medicaid and
cool.
able to reach out. So as a result, our business is kind of off the charts right now. We had 3 clinics a few months ago. We had one in Denver. We also have one in San Antonio, one in Austin, Texas.
Cool.
And so we just didn't have enough capacity to see all the patients here in Colorado. So we just recently, in the past few weeks, opened another location up in Westminster. Try to reach out to more of the Boulder folks. Our present location is kind of off Parker Road in Denver, so a little closer to Aurora. But yeah, it's been awesome. Getting on board with Medicaid has made treatment available. It can be as cheap as $2 or potentially free for folks who've already met their deductible. So it's been huge. It's been a huge community outreach with all these folks who've been getting laid off and already dealing with mental illness combined with COVID and the fires and all the other craziness going on right now. So I feel like it's been a great thing.
Yeah. And you mentioned Texas. Did you guys start here and then go down there, or was it the other way around?
No, actually, we started in Texas. So the owner is Dr. Carl Bonnet, and he's a 20-year Army vet. He was a flight surgeon. Presently, he works as a full-time ER doc over at the VA, but not a hippie or anybody in that sense. Like everybody thinks, this has got to be, kind of this new agey thing. But the truth is, he was, he spent 20 years in the military, been deployed 4 times, I believe, and really got sick of watching his buddies kill themselves, because the #1 killer of veterans returning from combat is suicide. You actually have a higher chance of dying from suicide as a military vet than anything else, and than being killed in battle or anything else. So it was based on research that for some bizarre reason, ketamine keeps people from killing themselves. So when they researched and they look back and they're like, hey, why do some of these vets kill themselves, some of them don't? Who recovers really well from PTSD, who doesn't? And they found for some reason there was some random correlation with ketamine. So Dr. Bonnet got this idea in 2015. Hey, let's open this small clinic and let's see what happens. Let's give it a shot. It just got legalized and see what goes on. So with the intention of, let's be able to reach out to the community, reach out to these Army vets, and see what we can do about it. To this day, he still has yet to receive a paycheck. It's something that he's done strictly as a service. So it's just been very rewarding and very cool to see how this started off as this tiny little clinic that he started in a storage shed outside of San Antonio, basically a small 1-room storage shed. Said, oh, let's see if patients come. And it turned out patients came from all over the country. And now we have 4 clinics and about 30 employees.
Wow.
That's awesome. And doing the Lord's work.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
And what brought you to Klarisana? How did you get involved in this project?
Oh, this was, it's interesting. So I kind of fell into it. I was looking for a career change. So I was in the Army myself. I was a Apache crew chief on the Apache helicopters. And got out of college. I worked as an EMT because I'm like, oh, what am I going to do for work? I can get my EMT cert and I'll work in healthcare. Loved healthcare, but I ended up getting a degree in mechanical engineering. I specialized in nuclear power for a number of years. I used to go around and work on upgrading nuclear power plants around the country. And healthcare versus construction are two very different workplace cultures. So I just I just felt like it was leave your values at the door when you go to work. And I'm one person working a construction job and then, versus my personal life. So I decided, I want to get back into healthcare. So I started, actually was looking for smaller companies in healthcare. And I found this ad on Indeed for Klarisana when they first opened here in Denver. I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. I still have my EMT cert. Maybe I can go in and help and, help them with some business development and whatnot. So I actually came on as a medic and was seeing patients and starting IVs, giving shots, those type of things. And as we grew, my background in project management and construction and all these things really became an asset, because as we've expanded the company, I've been able to take leadership and really look at the project management side, run all the numbers, do all the financial calculations and all that good stuff to really help us grow. So it's been kind of a wild ride to just fall into it, but for me it's been just a fantastic that career shift to doing something that I really believe in and making a difference in people while still getting to take engineering combined with military combined with healthcare and really be able to make a difference to folks in the community. Has been amazing.
And had you had any knowledge or was ketamine even in your lexicon? Did you know what it was? Had you heard anything about it, or did you just see the ad and say, let's go for it?
Not really. Well, I saw the ad and I was thinking, well, that's kind of cool. I pulled up some videos on YouTube and, of course, back in college, I loved psychedelics. I was all about, mushrooms, LSD. I had plenty of experience, going off the deep end with all that, but ketamine was new. But it's one of those things where it's fascinating and it's obvious that psychedelics, have such a powerful impact on people. And then to be able to come in and be a part of that and help people make those transformations, as well as take part in the research end of things and the business end, has been it's been awesome.
And as far as what's the difference between if we were at a party and we were to do some ketamine, or going to a clinic and doing ketamine assisted therapy? Well, what's the difference in your eyes and the clinic's eyes?
Well, there's a big difference there's several differences to it. Number one is the medication itself. We know where the source is. So at a party, the source might be questionable. We have a source for that. Number two, with anything in psychedelic medicine, they always talk about set and setting. So we do talk to the patients before they get started. Here's what to expect. We talk about what type of music would you want to have? We have everything's very nature themed, very controlled environment. It doesn't feel anything like a medical clinic, to the best we can keep it feeling like you're at home. Everything's, we have videos. We can basically just a bunch of videos on a USB. So we can change the videos in order to change the setting. People have headphones, some types of music. We actually keep all the medical equipment off behind the patient, so they don't look over and like, oh, am I still breathing or whatnot? They're good. So they don't feel like they're in a clinic so much, except if one of us walks in wearing scrubs that, I keep thinking maybe we need some psychedelic scrubs or something, make it feel more at home. But so that's big, is that it is a controlled setting. We do have professionals on board. All of our staff are medically trained. The likelihood of a side effect or anything it's so slim. But we do monitor blood pressure. We monitor heart rate. That tends to be a side effect. There's two side effects One is it temporarily raises your blood pressure, which in the great majority of people, that doesn't matter. And as soon as the med wears off, the blood pressure drops back down. So no big deal. But if we do get somebody who's, they're a risk, they've had medical complications, we do an appropriate intake, make sure they're appropriate. The other thing is, we want to do psychological screenings on patients before they come in. So it's, while on one hand, if you're an adult, you have treatment-resistant depression, you think this will work for you. We're fairly liberal in the sense that, okay, cool, we can, do an intake and let's talk about it. But it's so important that we're not giving ketamine to people who have a personality disorder as opposed to depression or anxiety or PTSD. It's actually a really cool book on this that just came out. Wow, let me think of the name. It was Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind. Maybe you guys have heard of that. It's pretty
Bought it
popular.
from my mom for Mother's Day.
Nice. So he talks about essentially there's a low entropy state of mind and a higher entropy state of mind. So low entropy state of mind is kind of being stuck in a rut. So that's your depression, PTSD, anxiety, where you keep running through the same thoughts again and again, and it's really hard to stir things up. The other thing is the high entropy, where you got schizophrenia, you got borderline personality disorder, things along those lines, where if we give that person a psychedelic, it's most likely going to ramp them up. And that's, we don't want to stir the pot any more than it needs to. They don't need that stirred up. So an interesting analogy I've heard with psychedelic medicine is say you've had a trauma in your life. That's kind of like, say you put a penny on a gymnasium floor and you wax it every year, another layer of wax, another layer of wax, another layer of wax. So eventually the penny essentially becomes part of the floor once it's, it's all smoothed over. So traditional therapy, talk therapy, would be, well, let's just chip away at this penny and let's dig it out of the floor. Where psychedelic medicine is more just the aspect of just turn everything into a snow globe, shake it up, and let you process and let things settle where they settle. So being aware of, to bring it back to the difference between a party situation versus a clinic is to be aware of where is that person coming from and what do they need. And the other thing is the first treatment is universally weird. Everybody who comes in first time, they don't know us other than what we've talked to with intake. They haven't been in this setting. So just to get a feel for how the flow goes, how to interact and to get comfortable in that space. So a good amount of patients, believe it or not, will actually get nauseous on ketamine. Nausea tends to be our number one enemy. We can really knock that out very well with meds if somebody gets that. So doing this on your own, there's like, we get some patients who say, I feel really anxious through this, or, I just got this bad feeling in my gut. And a lot of times the anxiety associated with it tends to be nausea related. And giving somebody an anti-nausea med can knock out a lot of that anxiety. The other thing that's interesting is dose is not as dependent on weight as you might think. So I've had, we had a patient that's about 6'2", 250 pounds, cop with severe PTSD. He came in for his initial treatment and we gave him a very small dose and he was off in ego death territory. Now the likelihood of that, and with no prior experience to psychedelics, the likelihood of that is tiny. I mean, less than 1% of patients are going to be that sensitive to it. On the other hand, we've had these 70-year-old little skinny old ladies who can just handle a massive dose and they're fine. So really becoming aware of the dose, how to mitigate the side effects, and having a controlled environment, making sure that we're putting you in a space where you want to be in. Because a good analogy for what we do is we want to put somebody in a psychedelic space. So think about it like if you're going to walk into a room. we want to put you, maybe that initial time you come in, we kind of want you to like poke your head in and look around and see, what's this space about? Let's get a feel for it. And then our treatment protocol is actually 6 sessions over a period of 3 weeks. So typically twice a week for 3 weeks, because those first ones, side effects plus getting used to the space and so on and so forth. So people don't really, on average, we don't get a huge breakthrough until typically 3rd, 4th session. Tiny percentage first, tiny percentage it might take 6 or even 8. That's really rare. But to put somebody in that space, to find where that space is, and to increase a dose to the point where you're comfortably sitting in that room and you're able to look around and understand what's going on. So if you get a dose that's super high, I mean, we'll say it's kind of like pushing you up against the far wall where, nothing makes sense. Your shoes are talking to you. You don't remember what's happened when you come back. It's like, sure, there may be a biochemical advantage to that, but we in our company really believe that there's also a psychedelic effect. It is therapeutic and not something to be avoided, which is a big difference between businesses in the ketamine industry. Is a lot of folks don't focus so much on the psychedelic effect. So in general, it's a huge difference to come in and see a clinic versus go out and do this on your own. You're out on your own. You don't know what you're getting. You're not necessarily sure what dose, or if you're, if you do have another condition, health or mental condition that might be contraindicated. So your likelihood out on your own is much higher that you're going to have a bad experience or find yourself in an unsafe position and whatnot. And we really do our best to create an experience, where patients feel comfortable and safe. And we've had, I'm going to say we're between 75-80% with relieving the symptoms of PTSD and depression and all that. So that's been huge.
And with that, what does a session look like? I mean, what is the length? Are there, is it like a therapy session in a sense where you're interacting with the therapist to talk about what you're experiencing, or is it kind of shades and music or videos, and you experience what you experienced and then talk about it? How does everything go down in the session itself?
Cool. So there's not necessarily one set session exactly, because every patient is different for what they want. Some patients really want to do, we'll call it ketamine assisted psychotherapy, KAP. Other folks, not so much. But in general, part of the intake does include speaking with a psychologist and getting just an assessment. So for folks, in general, let's say there's an 1.5-hour appointment. We used to do intravenous, so start an IV on the patient. But we actually switched over to intramuscular, which is just a shot in the arm, like just getting a flu shot. Interestingly enough, that the idea behind that was, well, that's going to make it cheaper for us to run. And we can reach out to more people because, it's COVID, we got to be super conscious of the costs and all that. And what ended up happening is we found that we can give roughly 6% of the dose of IV and get the same therapeutic and psychedelic effects. So the big advantage has been, reduced cost, reduced treatment time. So from an hour, or used to be a 2-hour appointment, we can do the same in an 1.5 hours. Patients don't have nearly as much of a hangover. They don't have the side effects that they used to have. And we give 2 shots. So you come in, you got an 1.5 hour appointment. We take your vital signs, make sure you're good. We chat with you, make sure you're comfortable. What type of video do you want? You got music, make sure everybody's set up. Some folks want a blindfold and noise canceling headphones. Some folks want to just have a video and be focused on that. We got big, comfy, these big recliners for folks to sit in. And then basically you get a shot and it ramps up. It takes off with the IM. All of our patients have preferred that too, which is cool. And then, so about 15 minutes in, we have one of our medics will check in, hey, how you doing? And check vitals. If everything looks good, get a second shot, and then just kind of ride it out over the next 45 minutes. And generally patients are coming down after about 45 minutes from that psychedelic space. The total duration of just kind of generally feeling altered can be as much as 4 hours. But there are folks who choose to do therapy through it, or I should say after it more so, because in general, sending people off into this psychedelic realm, it's not necessarily the best for therapy where you're going to articulate exactly what's going on. But if we have a patient who wants a lower dose and do therapy through it, that's cool. We do have a psychologist on board. Otherwise, most folks, it tends to be in the 30 minutes or so after their treatment that they'll talk about it. And every one of our patients, we give homework every time. So after your ketamine treatment, you go for a walk, you watch sunset, and no social media, no talking to that friend or family member who's going to piss you off, and really be conscious of, just take it in, because it's kind of like there's a lot coming at you in the experience, but it's after that experience where sometimes that hindsight and being able to reflect, and that reflection period is also very important to the healing process. So some folks have described it as getting a months or whatnot of therapy all in one sitting. And it's not unusual even to find patients who get anxious or kind of irritated after the fact, because they're like, oh, I got to change, there's 10 things in my life and I have to change all of them, and I want to do it now, but how do I do that? So when somebody says that, they absolutely are a good candidate for talk therapy as well, because we found because what we're getting is treatment resistant depression. We tell folks, if talk therapy worked, it would have worked already. This is an experience, we can't describe it. So from the perspective of what's an experience going to be like, can you tell me what it's like? By definition, no. It goes beyond words. So it's just all about managing the expectations, making them comfortable in that space, and then so after they recover for a few days, they tend to come in later that week. So say they come in maybe Tuesday, Fridays or whatnot, and they do that for 3 weeks. There can be a few therapy sessions in there. If they have therapists outside, we work with their therapists outside, and we just give them status updates on where the patients are at, assuming the patient's cool with that. Folks can always bring in a friend or family member if they wish to sit with them through the treatment. Some folks like to bring in their dog, which is always fun. But yeah, in general, there's so much flexibility that really what we try to do is create a space where the patient feels safe, combined with being able to, when you work in that field, you see so many people go through this, you kind of get a feel for, oh, maybe you should go up on the meds next time, or maybe back it off, or whatnot, to really fine tune the experience. But as time goes on throughout that series, patients learn where they feel good, what type of music they like, the whole setup. So as that progresses, it tends to be around the treatment number 4, where they get that really big breakthrough. We call it the therapeutic response. So it's just very variable depending on the patient. And of course, 6 treatments at the end of the day, that is arbitrary, right? I mean, it's not like a guaranteed 6. Maybe 1% of people, treatment number 1, that just does it. But in general, I'd say about 60-80% of folks is around number 4. So 6 seems to be the sweet spot. And then we do a maximum treatment of once every 3 weeks after that, depending, because our goal is to taper people off. The goal isn't to just, come in, let's just keep selling you treatments, because we don't want to be exposing people to, every 3 weeks for years and years and years. Nobody's done that much ketamine. We don't know what's the long-term
I know a few people.
Yeah. Maybe you can help us with some research there.
Yeah. So my follow-up to that would be, and I've heard this several times, why is it? Because typically you think like intravenous would be a faster like absorption, but from people that I've talked to, and it seems like all the clinics is that intramuscular is the route to go.
Mhm.
I'm just curious as to why that seems like it's a, you said, you mentioned you can do 60% of the intravenous dose, so it's like you're doing less but you're getting a
Mhm.
more impactful dose from that lesser dose. Is there any science or any reasoning why that is? Because typically I would think going into the bloodstream would be blasting off faster than an intramuscular.
Yeah, so it's just kind of how it's delivered. So if you think about it, if you go intravenous, let's say you're going to give, let's say 100 milligrams of ketamine, that's going to run on a pump. So it's going to be really steady. I mean, we could always give a faster rate initially to kind of lift off, but you're going to get this steady rate over an hour, and it's just continuous. Whereas with the intramuscular, the way we do it with 2 shots is say, instead of 100 milligrams IV, you get 60 milligrams intramuscular. So that would be 30 milligrams and 30 milligrams. So the initial shot would be 30. And that, man, that just takes off. That's, we've had patients describe that as being launched off an aircraft carrier. Because you essentially got 30 milligrams in you immediately. And even though it's in the muscle, 60 milligrams IV or 60 milligrams intramuscular you're still getting the same dose. It's just the delivery. So getting that 30 in the muscle, your body just absorbs it relatively quickly. Ultimately, just kind of launches you up. And then that 15-minute dose doesn't raise folks up nearly as much as that first one, but it's more of, it tends to peak after about 15 minutes, the experience from intramuscular. So by hitting it in that 15-minute range, we boost them up maybe about 10%, but it just prolongs that level where they're at so that we can kind of keep them in that space for a good 50 minutes to an hour. But basically it's just the route of administration that's just gets absorbed by the bloodstream and the muscle cells. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
And when it comes to treatment, I know you mentioned some trauma, and I know you mentioned depression. What are the key demographics when it comes to treatment that you guys are looking to treat? And are there some things that people are taking ketamine for that we wouldn't even think it would help for?
Yeah. So as far as key demographics, it's been treatment resistant depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD. The other thing that it works for, maybe you guys have heard about, is chronic pain. So there is use for that, and opiate withdrawal. Or we had a patient who she got off opiates, I want to say 6-8 years ago, and has been on Suboxone for that length of time. Which Suboxone is basically, instead of an opiate, it's an opioid agonist. So your body feels like you're on opiates, but without the high, essentially. Still just as addictive as any opiate, but you're a bit more sober throughout the day. She came in specifically because she wanted to get off of opiates, and we've had great success. She came in for a number of treatments, and she's been opiate free for quite a while. We've also did a study with a 10-15-year heroin user, where we had him basically agree to stop doing heroin the day that he came in for treatments. We did treatments with him over the course of a week, and the only side effects from heavy use heroin withdrawal that he got was essentially diarrhea for a day, and was withdrawal free within a week, which, if you've ever seen anybody go through opiate withdrawal, that's pretty impressive. The other thing that there's not a huge amount of studies. There are a few studies out there, but cluster migraines and cluster headaches. And I know that's more talked about with psilocybin being used to treat that, but there is some research out there that shows that ketamine is effective as well. So we do get some folks who want to come in for treatments to address that as well.
how did we get here? In a sense, from my understanding and knowledge, ketamine was an anesthesia that was used up
Mhm.
until like the Vietnam times for adult, and then
Mhm.
was more used for children anesthesia, and then obviously went into the veterinary world, and that's, I think, kind of where the underground area of ketamine kind of came to through the veterinary side of things. To, a couple of years ago, I had a friend that sent me an article that now ketamine is being experimented with for curing depression. um, I mean, how do we get from anesthesia to treating depression?
Yeah, basically, that's just a result of the studies where we looked at why do certain veterans, like, what is there anything that affects the suicide rate of veterans? Because initially this was used, like you said, back in Vietnam, because as an anesthetic, we can give this and a soldier can effectively walk off the battlefield at a lower dose. Um, so that was kind of the initial idea behind it, and then as it progressed and there's been more research on it, they've just found that it affects the NMDA receptors in the brain, which is essentially affects glutamate. So if for whatever reason, at a very low dose of ketamine, which would be considered recreational and psychedelic, the glutamate just really gets it skyrocketing. And at a high dose where you'd use an anesthetic, the glutamate gets blocked, which essentially just kind of shuts off your brain for a bit. So in seeing that these low doses have this high amount of glutamate, and that glutamate is connected with brain function, that then there's the question of, well, does this create new pathways, and can this actually, by ramping up brain activity, are we actually generating new pathways and accessing an aspect of neuroplasticity? And that's essentially the biochemical effect. So with our clinic, we do give much higher doses of ketamine than some other folks will, because we are focusing specifically on maximizing the psychedelic effect in addition to the biochemical aspect. And by being at that dose, we're also making sure that biochemically we are hitting all those receptors and creating that ability for neuroplasticity to occur.
And speaking of new patients and someone who might be listening to this podcast and the light bulbs might be going off, is 18 the age limit for you guys?
Yes, yeah, yes and no. So we do, anybody 18 and older, you can sign up and it should be fairly painless as far as getting, coming in. We'll do a basic psych eval, a medical review, and make sure you're fit. But we do have cases where we have treated adolescents in some cases, and it's actually worked fairly well with some teenage females with eating disorders and whatnot. The key difference being that if we do treat somebody who's under 18, there's a lot more medical liability that goes with that, and questions of how can that affect somebody's brain development later in life. So we will treat people under 18 with working very closely with a child psychologist who is completely on board with our treatment program. So it is an option for folks under 18 with outside child psychologist approval.
And are the majority, excuse me, are the majority people coming in, are they veterans in the sense of psychedelics, or are there a lot of first-time people who have no idea of a psychedelic experience or what they're getting themselves into? They just know that they've heard from a friend or someone that hey, this helps with PTSD, this might benefit you. I mean, what's the clientele? Is it across the spectrum?
It is across the spectrum. I would say most of our folks, believe it or not, have no psychedelic experience. and coming from all different directions in their life. A lot of it has been depression, anxiety, PTSD. I wouldn't even say that the majority at this point is veterans. A lot of the folks that we're getting now are just folks who've been, unemployed, and essentially they just have more time available. And now that we're taking Medicaid, it's like they have the time. Being isolated, I mean, the social isolation and the social distancing, which I hate the term social distancing. It really should be physical distancing. We're a mental health company after all. But that's really not been good for anybody's health. So people just having that opportunity to kind of kick back and do a little bit of self-reflection, and are seeing that this is an option for therapy. So we've gotten old ladies in their 70s who have no clue about psychedelics, and this is the first time we've had police officers who've come in, firefighters, and vets, and interestingly, one of the toughest things about getting veterans to come in, surprisingly, is we get a lot of veterans who don't want to be cured. We reach out and say, hey, we're going to do this. And they're like, well, but I depend on my disability. If I don't get my disability check, and it's like, we don't have, you can tell us whatever you want to. It's not like your disability is going to your check is going to disappear just as a result of getting treatment. But we've actually found a lot of folks who are resistant to coming in and even getting treatment because they don't want to see their disability check go away. But it's been across the board. I'd say probably most of the folks we get are, 30s and 40s, but we've gotten patients all across the board. I think the youngest that I've personally seen is 17, and I want to say the oldest is like mid 70s. And we do get a few folks who are experienced with psychedelics who've come in for treatments. And everyone who has had experience with psychedelics says that ketamine treatment it's its own animal. It's nothing like mushrooms, LSD, anything else. I can tell you personally, one of the things I was curious when I came on board is, after seeing all these transformations, I said, can I do an experiential treatment? And so we set that up, of course, all legit, intake, treated as a patient. We're not shooting each other up in the back office or anything like that. It's all totally above ground. But I was genuinely curious because I saw these huge transformations. And I'm like, well, it's been like 5 years since I've done any psychedelics, but that'd be kind of cool. Let's see what happens. And it is not a subtle experience. It's just profound, transformative, and very, very, very powerful. And the closest I've heard, I don't have any experience with DMT, but I've had some patients say that it would be closer to a DMT based experience than anything else, in the sense of the dissociative effect, because there's not, any other psychedelic that's recreational is not typically also a dissociative. So the interesting thing with it being a dissociative, it's like, say you have a friend who's, got this horrible girlfriend, and you're like, dude, what are you doing with her? Why are you hanging out with this girl? She treats you like crap. Nobody else likes her, but, and he's like, no, man, it's fine. She's totally cool. I don't know why everybody's got this problem with her. She's fine. Well, if you give them ketamine, now they can kind of step outside of themselves and they can see what you see. So that's one of the real advantages, is being able to see from this other perspective. Or likewise, in the sense of PTSD, you get a war vet who saw his buddy get blown up out in Iraq, and he's like, hey man, that was a set, that was there, and I'm here, and that doesn't need to define me. I don't need to bring that with me, 20 years later. So yeah, it's been across the board on the folks that we've had, everything from every walk of life, and experienced psychonauts to folks who are totally naive.
Sometimes you're better being naive. They always say not to have any expectations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's something we'll tell patients too when they go in for treatment, because sometimes people are like, oh, I really need an intention. I really need an intention for this. And it's like, why don't you just you know, your intention can be to allow this to take you where you need to go and to experience what you need to experience in order to heal. And sometimes that's the best intention to go into it with.
You had mentioned some vets being resistant, not wanting to get cured because they wanted to get that check. What are some of the other roadblocks you see with people who are maybe on the fence with treatment and, you know, not knowing if they should get it or not? Like, what are some of the things that you might see scare people or, you know, might hinder them from going to get treatment?
In general, there's not a whole lot. I have heard some folks that are concerned, you know, how is this going to affect my relationship, you know, with their spouse, or um, you know, they're just concerned that when they might be a little bit of a different person when they come out, and they're not quite sure who that person's going to be, you know. So, and that's people who are naive to psychedelics. I haven't heard that concern from anybody who has taken psychedelics, but essentially just kind of the just the unknown aspect of it. But there's not many folks who are concerned with that, and in general, it just allows you to see who you want, you know, who do you want to be, and it allows you to see where you are versus that person that you want to be. So it's not, you know, we haven't seen any detrimental effects in anybody, you know, and that's as a result of doing all the psychological screening and whatnot beforehand. But we haven't had anybody come out on the other side worse than they went in.
Well, but Ken always talks about when you get the message, put the phone down. Do you have people that are like after that fourth or fifth or even a third session where they're like,
Yeah.
I've got it, I'm good, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually been really cool to follow up with some of these patients, because we've had, you know, we've had some patients who they want to keep coming in for a bit because they feel like they need to be in that space. But we've had other folks who've come in for, you know, 4 or 5 sessions, and they're like, you know, I just get it. Like, I know what to do, and this is cool. And we've had, I know I can recall at least one patient who we've called 6+ months down the line. Hey, how you doing? You know, just get an update, and they're like, hey, I'm off my psych meds. I feel really good. I got this new job. You know, school's been going really well. Those type of things. So, you know, for some folks, they get the message, and it really has been amazing. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just a matter of giving yourself the time to implement everything that you learn at the same time. I mean, if you think you're just going to come in and that's it, and you don't have to do any work at all, and you're going to come out completely perfect on the backside, that's not going to happen. But ketamine has really been a fantastic catalyst for personal improvement and growth for the vast majority of our patients.
And I know you spoke on some homework that you guys give
Mhm.
people after their treatments. Is there any other reintegration that you guys suggest, you know, during the 6 treatments and after?
Well, we always do offer therapy for folks who want that. Some folks also have a talk therapist or a psych professional that they work with outside of our clinic, and we encourage people to stay involved in those communities. Um, and even, you know, a lot of folks that we get as patients have just given up. They've completely given up on all things psych related. They don't want meds. They don't want talk therapy. They're like, yep, been there, done that, did all of it. None of it worked. I give up. I don't have a psychiatrist. I don't want one. I'm good. And in those cases, we get some folks who they come in and get treatments and are like, you know, I want to change these things about my life. I really think talk therapy could help. And I really think getting involved or whatever's right for them. So we actually end up recapturing a pretty good amount of people and reintegrating them into, you know, into an appropriate treatment program for them. So, and sending them, you know, outsourced to whoever they want to work with is cool. They can work with our folks or they can go elsewhere. But yeah, everybody's kind of different. I mean, some folks, they find out, hey, I need to, you know, maybe it's just they got to change their diet, or they have better relationships with their spouse, or but I wouldn't say there's any one specific thing that's right for everybody, but it is about, really talking to the patients and finding out what's right for them, what's going to work for them, and just encouraging them to, take those steps to go in that direction. As far as our homework goes, I think that's kind of good practice, just life in general. Go for a walk every once in a while, take a look at the sunset, kick back, just take things and be mindful. Just have that, Zen-like meditative practice, like not just a walk, like I'm just going to go walk around the block as fast as possible, but a walk as in, how many trees are in my neighbor's yard, and, just really taking it in and being aware of your surroundings and how you fit into everything. And, yeah.
That's a big thing with Eckhart Tolle. He always talks about finding the newness in the norm. You know what I mean? Whether you're, like you said, walking around your block and looking at a different tree in your neighbor's yard, or noticing, your neighbor's decorations, or whatever it may be, finding that newness in whatever situation it is. And I think the big thing that we've discovered in our, 5 to 6 years of psychedelic research is the emphasis on how important the reintegration is, and knowing that you're going to have to do the work. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people dabble, or they read Michael Pollan's book and they think that this is like the magic bullet, the magic pill. It's like a cure all. You don't have to really do anything, but it's just, it's opening the doorway for you. But you really, just like with anything, whether it's being a chef or being an athlete, being a race car driver, whatever it is, you have to put the work in to get the results. So like the psychedelic, aspect of it is only just a small component of it. And I think some people might get let down a little bit when they come away from experience and thinking, again, where those expectations come in, was it, you're thinking that, you're going to go in and do this session, and then you're going to come out on the other side and you're going to be a totally different person. And it's like, no, this is just going to show you some things, but to be that other person, you're going to have to do these X, Y, and Z steps continually, daily. That's why they call it a practice, to be that better person, to fix the trauma. This is only going to, show you some things, open some doorways, and then it's up to you to kind of take it and do the work with it.
Absolutely, Rich. Like I couldn't put that better myself. That's absolutely been the case. And and to have that type of expectation going in is a really, just to have that idea that this is the catalyst, this is the start of that new path, but it's up to you to actually walk the path at the end of the day. And it's not easy, making that transition in life. I mean, everything, for a while, like sometimes you got to make all new friends, sometimes, whatever it may be, new job, new, maybe you move somewhere else, or whatever your path ends up taking you. But to really just become aware, like that awareness is the first step in making a change, is awareness. And that's really where we can, or any type of psychedelic medicine really makes a difference, is that first step of awareness. And then after that, it's up to you to see where it takes you.
Yeah. And I think too, sometimes people think like, oh, I'm going to cut out all these friends, or I'm going to move to a new city. And at the same time, is in doing those things, you can't ever outrun your mind. So if you're not working on those things, it doesn't, you might move from Denver to Austin, but those same bad habits that you may have, even though you're in a new location, you're going to figure out ways to be deviant, or to get yourself into trouble. It's like you still have to do the work with the practice and all those things. And yes, moving might help. Cutting out a certain population of friends or family may help, but you have to be aware that in just doing that isn't the cure all. Just like the psychedelic isn't the cure all either. You've got to put them together and balance them and work on it together.
And changing those mental, I think changing a physical habit is challenging. Changing a mental habit ramps it up to a new level. But Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with you on that, Rich.
And when it comes to the clinic, is there anything we haven't spoke on about Klarisana that you would want our listeners to know about that we haven't brought up to this point?
I think, one of the other cool things with what we're doing is that we are one of the clinics who actively does research as well. So we've done, we recently published an article, or maybe that was almost a year ago now, we published an article in the Annals of Clinical Psychology, where we studied veterans with PTSD. So that was pretty big as far as getting that research out. And one of the things that we're working on now is we're doing a randomized study of Medicaid patients. So we're actually taking a random selection of 30 Medicaid patients. Of course, no patient information being released in the paper, but just to get an actual number on how effective are we being, and how much can we help if we go through a state-sponsored system to reduce incidence of depression, suicide, PTSD, and how effective are we really? And as far as integrating that with systems that exist to help people gain access, how do we make a difference? So that's a big thing for us too, is that we are constantly trying to better ourselves. We're constantly working on the aspect of just quantifying that data and doing what we can do to move the whole science of psychedelic medicine forward. Because ultimately, right now we do ketamine therapy because ketamine it's above ground, it's legal, it's cool. I mean, if there comes a day when MDMA, we're taking part in one of the studies right now, or we're going to assist with a study for MDMA with MAPS. So if MDMA therapy becomes legal, we can do that. If psilocybin therapy becomes legal, we're on board with that. So ultimately, we are a psychedelic medicine company who right now is using ketamine to create these transformative effects. But the truth is, different psychedelics, I mean, you could look at it like different tools in a toolbox. I mean, a hammer isn't necessarily better than a screwdriver. It's just having the right tool for the right job. So ketamine, if you got chronic pain, treatment resistant depression, all these things that we treat for, ketamine's great. Some other folks, maybe psilocybin is what's going to work. And as we get that research and we collect data, if that's something that becomes legalized and we can treat for that, we're going to do it. Same with MDMA therapy. So as far as just being aware of just all that's out there and really working to refine it, because I think as far as psychedelic therapy goes, we're just now scratching the surface. I mean, imagine where we're going to be 100 years from now. I mean, maybe we can get some cool VR setup and literally put you up on the mountain with that Zen master, and find ways of really maximizing these effects and to really do the best that we can to reach as many folks as we can and make sure that we're doing that effectively.
Love it. Are you guys hiring and/or need research subjects?
Not at the moment. Not at the moment.
I do have two questions that are maybe not related to what's going on at the clinic, just more for my own personal kind of interest. The first one would be, I've also seen that, especially because it's been brought to our attention here in Colorado, that that EMTs and ambulances, some counties or some municipalities have ketamine on them. Do you know, like, what's the difference in dosage between like whatever the EMTs might be administering versus like the psychedelic aspect of what you guys are administering? Like, I'm just curious because, like I said before, there's many uses for ketamine. I mean, I'm assuming on an ambulance situation they're using it for more of a sedative. So, is a sedative dose like more than a psychedelic dose, or vice versa?
Yeah, so psychedelic dose is lower than a sedative dose. So we give lower doses. And the other, so there's basically in general, you'd have two reasons on an ambulance where you give it is if you have a combative patient, basically somebody who's, for whatever reason, maybe they've had a bunch of drugs, maybe they've, maybe it's a brain disorder or, and you just want to sedate somebody. That's an option. The other thing is sometimes I get patients who are in a lot of pain who have a previous opiate addiction and don't wish to be treated with opiates, in which case they can use that to manage pain. But in general, the doses they're going to give will be higher than what we give. And if you have a psychedelic effect, quite honestly, being in the back of an ambulance on psychedelics or in an emergency room is going to be less than pleasant.
We call those difficult experiences.
Yes, difficult experience. Yes, it would be a very difficult experience. So I can't imagine being in an emergency room in that state. So
no, that's not good.
Definitely, if that's for anybody who's wanting that type of treatment, I'd say you're far better off coming and seeing us at one of our clinics.
Okay, and then the other one I'm just curious of, is there a difference at all between like ketamine on the veterinary side versus ketamine on the human clinical side?
Well, I'm not so much I don't know quite as much on the veterinary side, but essentially it's used for the same purposes of it's an anesthetic, both for animals and for humans. I would imagine on the veterinary side, it's not used to induce a psychedelic experience, at least not intentionally. But that's about as far as my knowledge on the veterinary side goes.
Yeah, I was just curious because, like I said, all of my experiences have probably come from the underground side of things and have probably been from the veterinary side of things. So I was just curious. But yeah, I am definitely curious as to what the clinical setting and experience is like. So I'm definitely interested. Jim, you got a rapid fire?
Yeah. Are you a coffee drinker?
Yes.
How do you drink your coffee? How do you brew it?
AeroPress.
Hell yeah.
Just black. I got the Ethiopian, light roast Ethiopian.
Yeah, you can party with the Airey bros any day.
Yes.
Where do you get your beans? Anywhere particular?
Sweet Bloom here in Lakewood's been my favorite. What do you guys recommend?
I mean, over here, I'd say probably Corvus on South Broadway is probably one of our favorites. Nixon is another coffee house that we go to fairly regularly, and Pablo's is not too far from the house either. So, but we've also been on a bit of a Mount Hagen freeze dried instant coffee kick for a couple months just for convenience purposes. But there are 2 AeroPresses in the closet right now, or in the cabinet rather.
Nice. I can appreciate that.
Do you have a daily practice or daily ritual?
Myself, I've been a meditator for quite a while. Maybe coming up on about 10 years now.
Wow.
Yeah. So I do at least 1, if not 2 meditations a day. It's just kind of been a personal practice. Just kind of myself. I used to deal with depression and PTSD and all that. And being an engineering nerd, I figured, well, statistically speaking, meditation, can regrow connections and help. So I tried out a bunch of different practices. I ultimately, then I kind of got fed up with the hippie culture because I'm like, well, these guys keep saying this is going to change things, but it never changes. They're in the same spot. So I actually study under a Swami. He's been a Swami for 50 years out in the Hollywood area with the Vedanta Society. So yeah, that's been my way to center myself, and it's been a huge part of my life, just in terms of taking that time to chill and figure out what's important, de-stress, and just kind of activate that internal guidance, so to speak.
Are you doing like a TM or anything specific? Or? Yeah.
It's pretty much same thing as a TM, same idea.
Cool.
Yeah.
How'd you find a guy in California?
Pure chance. One of the I used to live in Tucson, Arizona, and I was looking into all these meditation types, and I actually studied at a Buddhist temple for a while. I was Thai Buddhist. And I always felt like there was this huge cultural barrier because you can't touch the monks. So then I went and I looked on Meetup and Facebook and found some meditation groups and went and studied with them. But then I just kind of got irritated at the sense that I was like, these people keep wishing for things, and I had been there for 6 months, and I'm like, they're in the same place. So if this worked, that wouldn't happen. And one of the guys in there I got to be friends with after a while. I'm like, you know what? I'm not coming to this anymore. I need to find a real teacher. I want a real guru. He's like, oh, you want to meet a guy? I'm like, yeah. Like, there's actually a Swami who comes out and he teaches around the country, and he's coming out here to give a lecture tomorrow. Do you want to come out? And he's like, I'll introduce you to him. It's cool. So I did, and he's been the head Swami for the Vedanta Society of Southern California for a number of years. He's been a monk for 50 years. And yeah, so it's, I remember I've always heard, when you're ready, the teacher will come. And in my case, that was literally the next day, which was kind of funny.
Have you ever been to Crestone?
No, I don't think so.
Check it out.
What do you suggest out there?
It's just like it's in the San Luis Valley, and there's all kinds of different things that have been said to go on or been seen in the San Luis Valley. But Crestone itself has a bunch of different ashrams and different Hindu and Buddhist monasteries all throughout the town. It's it's very kind of hippie but off the grid, but there's also all these different spiritual centers there, and there have been monks and stuff that have come from the Himalayas and say that this area in Colorado is just as spiritual and just has just as many different things going on as, say, like in the Himalayas or in Tibet or these different places. So
all right, I
got
just
a
wrote it
weekend,
down.
you want to
It's
get
on
out
my
of the city
list.
and go get weird, go down to Crestone. And it's also, I've only been there once, but it was the, I guess, only place where the Milky Way was as clear as day in the sky, and there was you could differentiate it and be like, oh, there's the Milky Way. I've never experienced this in my entire life. So really cool place, lots of different weird, quirky, kind of woo-woo things going on there. But yeah, and it's not too far from Great Sand Dunes, so you could kind of go do that, see all those different temples and stuff, and then go over to the sand dunes and get some sand in your pants.
All right, that's next on my list. I'm excited. I'm going to do it.
Cool. Jim?
You, bro.
Okay. Neil, do you have a favorite conspiracy theory?
Favorite? I don't know. It's interesting. I have a friend who's all into conspiracy theories.
Yeah, me too. It's my brother.
So, but I don't know. I've always thought, I've always figured that there's got to be life outside of the U.S. or not the U.S. the globe. The Earth. To me, the thought that there's an entire universe out there, and we are the only sentient life forms in that entire universe, seems completely wild, and I don't buy it. So I suppose if I had to name a conspiracy theory, I'd have to say that there's been extraterrestrials who have visited our planet. If I had to buy into one of them, I suppose that would be it.
That's another reason to check out Crestone. Crestone, I believe, it might be in the world, but definitely in the United States, has the highest reported sightings of UFOs or
Nice.
UFAs or UIAs. What are they calling them these days?
I'm not sure.
I've never seen one, but I'm down for it.
Cool. Yeah, check it out.
Neil, what are you listening to right now? Podcasts, music, audiobooks?
Let's see. I always have. What is my most recent audiobook? Now I'm drawing a blank. I listen to, let's see. So I'll listen to NPR a lot of the times if I'm driving to work or whatnot. And I just started listening to Culture Code on audiobook, and that is more just about how do you create a positive corporate culture and how that impacts everything. Because I really believe, especially like with what we do, I'm always about personal improvement and learning, and I think that for us to really be effective at treating people, we got to have an awesome corporate culture, and we do. And it's how do we maintain that? Because the truth is, somebody on psychedelics is in they're hyper susceptible to everything going on around them. And if the folks that work with me and in our clinics aren't enjoying and having a good time, then the patients are surely going to be affected in that state. So I'm always on the reading something. So that's my latest, though. Just got that one started the other day.
I got one last question. What is there a common music that people like to listen to when they're going in?
No. So this is what's interesting. There are some folks who listen to metal. I can't imagine metal being a good mix with, but there are folks who love it. Some folks listen to like an upbeat classical. Some folks like new age. Some like EDM is pretty cool. But everything kind of across the board. And interestingly, I learned this from our psychologist that music, as you know, you have songs that you've listened to, and it has a connection, and it reminds you of a certain point in your life or whatnot. And I've heard that if you play those songs in a psychedelic state, that it actually allows you to really process all of those memories associated with the song. That's just something I just learned the other week. So I don't know any patients who've gone through it yet, but he assures me that he's had quite a few patients listen to, oh, this song reminds me of such and such. Cool. Let's have you listen to this during a psychedelic experience, and it allows you to actually process it. But as far as what they like, it is all across the board, and I couldn't be more shocked that some people prefer metal, but if it works for them, I suppose that's cool.
Gonna have to break out that breakup mixtape. Yeah, the metal thing is confusing to me, and I always think back to that scene in Airheads where he says, if it's too loud, you're too old, because so much of the music I used to listen to in high school and college, when I hear now, it just is like nails on a chalkboard to me, and a lot of that is like the punk rock, the hardcore, the metal sort of stuff. And I work with some younger guys, and they're like, oh, do you like this band? You like that band? I'm like, yeah. And then they play it, and I'm like, oh, I used to like this band. Now it makes my head hurt.
Totally get that. Yeah, likewise.
Neil, it has been an honor and a pleasure. We really appreciate your time and your knowledge and your insight, and dabbling and exploring into the world of ketamine with us today. So thank you very much. And it's been great. We might have to come down and see you sometime now that we know that we can get healthcare coverage.
Hey, please do. I'd be happy to meet with you guys anytime.
Awesome.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Jimmy, Rich. You guys rock. Much appreciated.
Appreciate you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.